I don't think it's a coincidence that social media starts with this ability to report people that are being radicalized, that at least one state government is going to be using state police to prosecute people spreading what they call disinformation. Whether or not that's misinformation is not even part of the discussion. And at the same time, you have a somewhat unknown and yet at the same time somewhat well-known YouTube account that may or may not have belonged to a famous person who may or may not have killed himself recently, making posts with some little brackets and numbers and missing vowels and such, and it seems like code. Well, let me tell you something. I was part of a deal back in 2008, 2009, and even a little bit before that, that was of the same nature. And when in 2017, a similar set of brackets and numbers and such, promises of events to come, started floating around the underground, it was as if mind control triggers had been activated in me, and I jumped into this thing, and I was like, wow, I remember that thing from back in the day. I practiced, I trained for this, I'm ready. And then very quickly I was like, well, wait a minute, what was the outcome of the last thing? The outcome of the last thing was nothing whatsoever. None of the war criminals who enabled 9/11 were arrested. None of these people ever faced justice. On an international basis, a couple of them are able to, they're not allowed to travel internationally, but no justice was ever served. And then one of the other promises that previous president made was to close Guantanamo Bay, and then in the next mind control scheme, using the little brackets and codes, promised that all these people were going to go to Guantanamo Bay, and that also never happened. So now that the polls are showing that people are not falling for the media's shtick, and that I would say safely more than half of people know what's up with last year's event at the end of the year but a little bit before Thanksgiving. I'm being careful. No coincidence that at a time when they are trying to see if we can get your friends and family to report you, that the false hope apparatus fires back up because they know that a bunch of y'all are going to go, yeah, see, it said it's going to happen. Yeah, woo! All over your social media, which lights yourself up like if you're trying to hide from night vision and you light a cigarette, or you're trying to hide from night vision and you turn on a whole bunch of infrared spotlights on yourself and then start, hello, I'm right over here, announcing your position. Making you to believe things that are simply not possible at this time. For example, statement about Law of War, Chapter 11, Section 3. I don't think such a thing exists, but there is an 11.3 that I was able to locate that refers to military occupation. Now, unless we're being warned about an impending military occupation, in which case occupying your own citizens is already illegal, I don't think that any code of war or law of war is going to be considered valid or whatever by an occupying army of our own. We know that the leaders of the military and the DoD right now are very much getting into the woke movement, that they did a 60-day stand down and loyalty oaths, that there are a growing number of troops who are refusing a particular medical procedure. And if those folks that are refusing were to band together, maybe something could happen. However, at the moment that they do so, they would be criminals. See how that works? The government sets the laws. The government is also corrupt and doesn't follow its own laws. They are theoretically criminals, except that they make the laws so they can change the laws. But people whose job it is to defend or uphold or enforce the law, as soon as they choose not to, or to go against that order, they become criminals. And they are all trained and indoctrinated to have an issue with that. So what'll happen is they'll say no, and then they'll go to get ready to stand up, and instead what they're going to do is stand down, because there's a conflict in their mind between the need to fix a problem and the need to obey orders. So, all spring, about once a week, every other week or something, there was a new rumor spreading from somewhere that this and that was going to happen by X day, and then it passed, and then maybe this and that by the next X day. And it's like, how many more times is this going to happen before anybody, really wises up to it? Well, I wised up to it because I'd already been caught up in the shit twice. And as soon as I realized that I'd been caught up in it twice, I became immune to it because I really forced those critical thinking skills to engage and to stay engaged. So, no, I don't believe that any drastic action is going to be taken. And I do not believe that it is a wise idea to attempt to organize such drastic action on our own at this time. After all, we're going to need F-15s and nukes, right? More likely, I think what it is an attempt to get people to out themselves, to make it easier to identify the people who are most reactive and controllable, and to get them out of the way. Because they may not be useful, as it were, pun not intended, for any actual purposes of securing freedom, defeating tyranny, or whatever. They're certainly useful to, spreading disinformation and making themselves obvious. But what they are otherwise useful for is that they do get very loud online, and they do spread a lot of information, and you reach a point where the algorithm can no longer contain all of it, and information spills over. Simultaneously, there was a pretty big thread on Twitter going on that was running down exactly what happened, and they didn't even have to invoke the dreaded F word, never mind that the word coming from some of the people in the Arizona State Senator saying that once you see the results of this one county, you're going to realize that every county in the state and every county in every state really ought to have one as well. And that is something that can be done legally without any insurrection, without any clashes necessarily. But as this Twitter thread was talking about, they went through and allowed to happen what they did because they were concerned about riots. And meanwhile, they ought to be concerned about the people who own more guns than the rioters. But there was a successful COINTELPRO operation implanting serious cognitive dissonance and effectively pacifying all of the people who were most likely to take such drastic action. That's all there is to it. To say anything further, I'd basically just be repeating myself. But again, the deal that started off with secret messages in intentional misspellings and or the odd capital letter in the wrong part of the word in a particular president's tweets actually stems back from a previous operation in which the president before him, who was the first president to operate a Twitter, had a much similar thing. Now, I will add, without repeating myself, that first president on Twitter also signed off a series of modernizations of a particular act, which repealed the original act by the same name, modernized it. The trick with the modernization is to keep it legal, it depends on national security interests. And as soon as they decide that there is an emergency, I mean, look at Michigan. They're already getting ready to go door to door and find out who believes and who doesn't and try and arrest and prosecute anyone who doesn't believe, regardless of whether the majority of people don't believe. This is what totalitarians do. So there is no online movement to be had. There is no meme war It's an information war, not that kind of information war. It has more to do with the information that everybody is fed and takes in and believes, such as fake news on the media networks or super secret Twitter tweet encryption codes promising things that will simply never happen because they're not in the interests of the people who are operating the operation to let happen. That's all it is. So you can believe some psychological operation nonsense, or you can make sure that you and your own, in your home, are prepared to survive any potential purges, societal collapses, or drastic hardships caused by, for example, hyperinflation. Maybe might such a thing happen. You can acquire what arms you can get your hands on, and you can acquire what ammo you can get your hands on. But you got to understand that if they show up and you just hand it over, you've just handed over any last semblance of your freedom. What's that thing? Something, something on your feet, better than something, something on your knees? Think about it.